Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today for the first Fractal and Google Cloud Leadership Roundtable and Virtual Fireside Chat. Today's topic is the future of enterprises with AI on Google Cloud. I'm Satish Raman, Chief Strategy Officer Fractal, and I will be your moderator today. At the outset, I would like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on the Fractal website at fractal.ai. Attendees are currently in a listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the webinar, please send me a message via the Q&A box on your screen, and we will address them during the Q&A session. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce my esteemed panelists. First, I'd like you to meet Carolee Gearhart, Google Cloud's Global Channel Chief and Vice President of Global SMB Sales. She's responsible for the tens of thousands of partners attached to Google's cloud businesses, ensuring that Google Cloud's sales team has a selection of highly skilled partners around the world, and that Google delivers a world-class experience for partners, and that partners deliver a superlative experience to Google's customers as well. Carolee is also responsible for the Google Cloud SMB business, which helps millions of small and medium-sized businesses globally in their journey to the cloud. Carolee has more than 20 years of industry, international sales, and executive management experience with an accomplished track record of leading global channels and delivering extensive growth. Accompanying Carolee and me is Don Vadakan, Head of Sales at Fractal. Don is our sales and business development leader and a member of the executive leadership team at Fractal. Don is a top performing and competitive sales leader equipped with over 25 years of success in new business development experience. He possesses a track record of spearheading multi-million-dollar sales and contracts, and his proven leadership capability coupled with cross-continental expertise in business development, sales management, and execution. Thank you both so much for taking the time today to share your perspectives on the future of enterprises with AI on Google Cloud. Carolee and Don, welcome again. Now that the panelists can see us and the rest of the attendees can as well. So I just want to kick it off with rewinding a bit about what kind of a roller coaster year the past 12, 15 months have been. We saw businesses plan at one extreme, of being wiped out to another extreme of growing, bonkers. And like Google became a synonym and a noun, if you will, in the English language for search and things related to go Google it. We did find a few other acronyms and nouns, if you will, or common nouns in the current year, including Zoom and Instacart and the like. And we all learned that the most famous and well-known chief digital transformation officer was a little-known virus called COVID-19 about 15 months ago. And I think the single largest transformation that we saw, at least in the US, was that 93% of households with school-going children adopted to a completely online, remote, digital distance learning platform. And if that isn't transformation, what else is? I think the anecdotal quote around 2 years, if not more, of digital transformation being accomplished in 2 months has never been truer. And telehealth utilization was another interesting area with over a 300x increase in the use of telehealth and related technologies for people to be able to do simple things like having doctor visits. On the industrial side, digital twinning went from becoming an idea to a POC to becoming a reality, so much so that what one would think as staid industries like construction, which is $10 trillion globally, saw rapid adoption and acceleration to the cloud. And all of this led to the just infrastructure as a service marketplace growing to greater than $150 billion in run rate revenues at the end of December 2020. And the market capitalization of public cloud companies increased 120% between February 2020 and February 2021, right? So With that as a backdrop, Carolee, let me start with you. As we work through these unusual times and people look and search for a new normal, what about these changes do you think is exciting for companies in the enterprise or the SMB space?
Sure. Thanks, Satish, and great to be here with you and Don. Really appreciate, excuse me, you having me join you. So I think, look, you rightly outlined a lot of what has been sort of an unprecedented year by any stretch of the imagination. And I think times of disruption really create, it's clear, tremendous opportunities and provide room for sort of new innovation that goes on. Customers have been reimagining, as you outlined, almost everything about the way they engage with customers and workforces in the past year. I vividly remember sort of April of last year and talking to the CEO of a bank in Korea at the time, who had moved completely to digital branches. And we were having a conversation about what it was going to look like. And many of you may be familiar, South Korea got very aggressive. They actually reopened much quicker than many other markets. And as we continued to have those dialogues, the reality was they said, we're simply going to continue to look at digital branches going forward, sort of, there's no going back for them. And so this has really meant transforming themselves, transforming their industries, and really transforming the way folks are interfacing with their customers. As you outlined, it's been new market realities that have come about. Some industries and segments are seeing, unprecedented growth. Others are struggling to survive. It's been pretty consistent that business owners are driving much more of the decision-making versus IT in this environment, because it really is about remaking that customer experience that someone is having. And I think there's good news for companies in this. Investments that they're making today are not just sometimes where you have to do a one-time cost with no return because of a situation that's going on. These are all investments that are going to pay dividends over time. As it's clear, the world is not going back to the way it was before, really ever again in the same way. Look, I have a fantastic job. I have the distinct privilege of getting to talk to partners and executive business leaders around the world. And it's really been interesting to see the way they have taken advantage of sort of this opportunity to disrupt, to be creative, and to reimagine. When you think about, retail consumer buying behaviors that have changed rapidly, and they're expected to continue to shift. When I think of my almost 80-year-old mother, you referenced Instacart, like learning to buy groceries online, to almost every mom and pop restaurant learning to have a website that's taking orders online, boy, have things changed. And that won't ever go back. My mom knows how to do that now. And if she does, there's probably not anyone who doesn't know how to do it. And I think for retailers, specifically for that industry, it's obviously been quite a ride. We had customers who experienced 3 times their Black Friday traffic, which normally, we prepare for months in advance. They're thinking about that. What are the offers they're making? And suddenly that was on, and it went on day after day. That great toilet paper crisis we all experienced, was around sort of grocers, big box stores that had gaps too, frankly, between their e-commerce and their supply chain. You could place an order and then get your little notification, order canceled. And that really related to the fact that they'd never seen traffic like that they were able to bridge gaps sometimes with people, et cetera. And it really exposed the challenges. Those who were able to quickly respond to that, identified these are like must-have capabilities that they've got to have. And again, those capabilities are going to continue to benefit them as they have an improved supply chain continuity. They're better able to understand. I know we're here to talk about AI and ML and the impacts of that, better able to understand and predict what customers are looking. And those will be the differences between somebody who is surviving versus someone who is thriving. And, I mentioned financial services just to kind of, briefly touch on from an industry lens what's going on, but, tremendous shift there to mobile interfaces, and the same thing, really having access to data in a way that they haven't before. And how do they drive a new tailored experience that really speaks to me on my mobile, like many of you, I actually downloaded a credit card app that I'd never used before in this period because I was doing things differently than I had before. And so much more of what I was doing was actually moving to my phone, and it becomes much more relevant what I see there. And again, companies who are able to really harness that information to more effectively, whether it's a consumer or a business, and certainly all of our expectations as businesses have really changed, haven't they, in terms of what we expect. We've been schooled on a consumer experience, and when you turn up at your office or when you're trying to engage with another company in a professional capacity, our bar is different than it used to be. You know, I vividly remember the way it used to be to enter expenses once upon a time versus now picture, send, done, you know, and off I go. And so these things, you know, think about, and you touched on also the healthcare industry and certainly telehealth. You know, many of us, I myself, have been into a virtual doctor in the last year. And I think that aspect has also been complemented by the way in which AI is remaking treatment plans for millions of people, using new diagnostic tools that are faster and more effective, that require fewer people interacting with one another. I mean, these are things that I think have been a real win in a situation that, of course, has been unprecedented and so difficult for so many.
Thanks so much for that, Carolee. Yeah, it definitely touched every single industry known to us in a manner that we had not seen coming, if you will. You know, he asked the same question in December of 2019. The response would have been completely different. But Don, can you share your insight with us, and you know whether you've been hearing the same things, similar things, some points of view that you know you can provide relative to how Fractal has been, you know, witnessing this, you know, time, if you will, over the last 15 months.
Oh, thank you so much. And Carolee, I couldn't agree with you more. Thanks, Satish, for that. I think a couple of interesting perspectives that I've heard firsthand. I was listening to a chief digital officer, and his perspective, it puts it in a nutshell very nicely, right? When the pandemic started, it was very obvious that certain companies, certain organizations would do well. There was some that was set for failure. And if they failed, it was expected. But here's the interesting part. Some of these actually used the opportunity as they were failing to change their business. Let me put it in perspective. Disney as a brand, if you look at it with all its physical facilities in Orlando and in the West Coast, was obviously looking at a serious setback. But what they did was, by launching into subscription services, launching Disney Plus, they were able to do what Netflix did in 7 years in 5 months. That is how organizations have used this difficult situation to their benefit, right? Similarly, if you notice, given the fact that now this is entirely digital, the playing field became reasonably level playing fields, right? So you have small operators who've got a distinct offering. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard of this brand called BarkBox. Now, BarkBox is a pet food company, but the very fact that they have branded themselves as a small, ethical organization, and with people's buying behaviors changing, they actually capitalized on this to become a significant player in the market of pet food, which has been run by several multinationals, right? So when we're looking at, you know, that the fact that digitization has grown by 3x, so what happened in 7 years actually happened in about 6 months of this year itself, the digitization spends. So what we're looking at is two kinds of organizations. One who are the real innovators, who will come up with a niche, and the others who are actually copying successful organizations and doing better and faster. Amazon is a classic example, right, in online retail. But when Walmart came, they achieved what Amazon achieved, and they were able to switch 17% of Amazon clients to Walmart Plus. So you have organizations who are using a successful formula and doing it better, faster, and organizations becoming innovative and taking advantage of a level playing field. Now, given the fact that you don't have leverage, but everything is online, so you really have some real smart operators who are taking full advantage of this opportunity. So that's what we are seeing here from our side.
Don, thanks so much for sharing that. I think the underpinning notion Carolee, both what you said and what Don mentioned, was all of that was powered by technology, and more specifically by nonlinear use of specific capabilities, if you will, like artificial intelligence, leveraging the power of the cloud. So that forms a good segue to something that I'd like to ask you about. What do you see on the horizon for this industry, right? The cloud industry, and what is your take on how Google Cloud, given that's whom you represent and you work at, will change the world in a manner of speaking, right? Now, we don't know what the new normal is. We all have some expectation of it, but we do reckon and realize that it is going to be a new world out there post-pandemic. So can you share some perspectives on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I think we've alluded to some of the ways that it already has. I think what it has flagged when I think about in the context of the broader market has been sort of the popularity of multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is going to continue to rise. I think customers and, Don talked about folks who were able to leverage the moment, who was able to sort of adjust to the amount of elasticity of 3x Black Friday activity versus not in one short period of time. Those are the folks who managed to thrive versus those who were able to survive. And I think this aspect of sort of, we already knew in the market, Gartner estimates that by 2021, by the end of this year, 75% of mid-sized and large organizations will have adopted a multi-cloud or hybrid IT strategy. I think they're trying to make sure they don't have all their eggs in their basket, that they're more agile and able to respond to what's going on in the market. And so this means that customers really aren't looking for approaches that lock them into a particular vendor or partner, but they're looking for folks who can help them embrace a inclusive, multi-cloud, multi-vendor environment. And I think, I feel lucky because Google's really uniquely positioned to respond to that kind of dynamic. We've really consistently championed openness. Kubernetes and TensorFlow are great examples of contributions that we've made to the open source community. And of course, we have our own management capability that run on top of that. And we've released Anthos, which allows customers to code once and then deploy that across multiple environments, whether it's hybrid or multi-cloud. I think this is really about, the way we'll change things is around customer value. And that matters to them because that flexibility allows them to focus not on no value add overhead for customers that's around re-platforming or adjusting to manage for different environments. It's build it once, really build it for what's optimal for your customers, and then be able to move and adjust wherever you want and to meet those customers where they are. And I think the other piece that we're seeing, our customers are going to be looking past their bottom lines to really start focus on those opportunities to innovate on behalf of their customers. In the end, when someone leapfrogs, right, it's typically not because they've saved money their way out of it. They've done something differently. Now that different may in fact also drive cost savings, but it's really around what that customer experience is. So as customers continue to grow their cloud deployments, they're not only realizing that, sure, they can save money doing this, but it's the potential that provides them for innovation and agility on behalf of their customers. And, a great example of that is where we see things like Google Cloud's contact center AI come in, which is around enabling customers to leverage the benefits of cutting edge AI and ML and technology to really help customers address problems. There were, lots of articles that came out of some of the facilitation that we were doing at the front end of, at the start of this, of employee, claims for folks who are out of work, and state governments who were getting overwhelmed with the volume that was coming in. And what you really want to do is be able to get the right information to folks quickly and ensure you can preserve resource of people to address the more complex and more urgent situations of individuals. And I think we're going to continue to see changing the world around technology becoming more accessible and democratized for customers. How impactful is it that you could be anywhere in the world now and access the kind of compute power that's available? It's allowing folks to innovate that wouldn't have had the funds to build that kind of infrastructure independently, to leverage in on a smaller scale on a consumption basis of what they need to actually build really creative things. And so the cloud's going to allow organizations to access those infrastructure and technologies that they couldn't otherwise. And it's playing out in particular with AI and ML. I think about Fractal and working with one of Europe's leading media and entertainment businesses that's serving a multi-million-dollar customer base and providing sort of a range of products across TV, broadband, telephony. And customer experience is really becoming one of those significant differentiators. And so all of you, Fractal implemented an AI-driven solution that was based on Google Cloud's platform to really understand that customer experience in real time, identify key drivers, which enabled sort of upstream decision and designing of market intervention strategies that really increase reducing the propensity of churn and reducing the number of customer cancellation calls. And those are real measurable results for a business. And you want to prevent having to roll out costly retention efforts if you can make them happy before you get to that and really nurture that relationship. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, I'm responsible for our, or as Satish mentioned earlier, I'm responsible for our SMB customer base globally. And it's big. We're acquiring over 1 million new customers a year. So the scale of this business is really, really large. And I've been able to see the incredible impact work on AI models has had on optimizing our funnel and materially impacted that business. We've used it with dramatic results to think about routing online traffic to particular offers, ensuring that customers are routed to the most efficient resource, the one best able to help them, and to also help us identify where there are new upsell opportunities in that customer base. So I think over the next decade, every company is going to be transformed by AI, and we're just beginning to really start to see the impact that it'll have in making business processes more efficient, better informed, and ideally more customer friendly and driving more customer value.
Very, very insightful, Carolee. And I can certainly remember conversations from 2 years ago when people were talking about Industry 4.0 and the amount of time it would take for that to become a reality. And literally within 90 days, I remember this conference that I was at where this was mentioned, where people were guessing how long it would take for that to become a reality. And fast forward 90 days, we started working on it because we had no other choice. But Don, let me pose this one to you in the context of what Carolee just mentioned. Why are our clients, Fractal clients, excited about doing business on the cloud, right? And what are some of the disruptions that you are seeing, with clients and prospects?
This is something which is truly transformative from a Fractal perspective, right? I think I was kind of cringing when you were introducing me, Satish, about my 25 years. And I still remember when mid-range computing was hot, right? Mainframe was not hot anymore. Mid-range was hot. And I still remember when you were talking of a transformative program, the first 30% of the time sequentially was there for data center setup. If you were to look at that kind of a setup today in today's context, right? I can give you an example of our founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO, who was working with a government agency around the COVID problem. Can you imagine the social impact of spending 3 to 6 months in a 12-month window trying to set up infrastructure? What really happened there was we got a conversation that started in the morning. Overnight, the infrastructure was set up, and we were able to build and run models in the next 24 hours. Can you imagine the social impact? Now, we may not have got it all right. It may not have been perfect, but the ability to turn this around, the impact is just dramatic. It's about life and death, and it's about helping agencies, both industry and government, to take decisions which are rapid, timely, and have a huge impact. I mean, this commercial impact is just for everybody to see, but social impact is something that we should not forget. And what I'm also seeing is with this ubiquitous nature of compute power at your fingertips, right? What is happening is problem solving is no longer localized. It is global. It's a global effort. I am seeing organizations set up global digital hubs where they are easily replicating working across the US, UK, Brazil, Southeast Asia, India, China, you name it. But at any given time, having 4 different hubs is not in the realm of imagination. It's reality. People are actually working together in hubs. And more importantly, I think this is something that we are seeing in industry is folks are now absolutely emboldened to fail fast. They're not afraid. We work with a client who has mandated that if you cannot come up or solve a problem in a POC in 3 to 4 weeks, it's not worth doing. I mean, that's the level of rapidness that they've brought into their decision-making thinking. So if there is a problem, prototype it in a couple of weeks. If it's going to take a couple of months, don't even bother. Because if it works in a couple of weeks, it will work at the enterprise level because they are no longer worried about setting up infrastructure. So speed, the ubiquitous nature of the access and the compute power that organizations like Google bring allow Fractal to focus on matching and exceeding human performance as far as it comes to AI. We are no longer worried about the infrastructure side of things. We are just worried about improving what we do. And now we are actually moving towards incorporating behavioral sciences and not just looking at data in its pure form. We're also looking at data plus human behavior and behavioral sciences to produce better outcomes. So this has clearly enabled us to get better and better at what we do, which is our AI capabilities, but also then leverage the ability to go out there and look at customer behavior, with a whole new lens. So it's, there's this classic example that, it's an interesting anecdote, right? We use the best compute power and we use the best data to identify for an ice cream company, which is the ideal location to put an ice cream cart in a retail store, right? Guess what? People still walk past it because, ice creams have a connotation of, weight, unhealthy living. People just walk past it. And the best amount of AI did not sell ice creams. And then we actually brought in our behavioral scientists who just looked at it, they watched what's going on. And what they did was incredible. Every time somebody walked past the ice cream fridge, the ice cream cart music started playing in the background. And that triggered a visceral reaction, a memory in people's minds that led them to go and pick up a tub of ice cream. Now, this is the kind of work that helps companies innovate and differentiate and use things like data, compute power, and behavioral sciences to bring it all together.
Got it, Don. That's very helpful. We spoke about some of the areas where technology broadly, and then specifically cloud and AML are helping the acceleration. But if I was to switch gears a little bit and say, from both of your vantage point, and Carolee, we'll start with you. Can you elaborate on some of the key challenges that mid-sized or mid to large size B2B companies potentially face, or are a little skeptical about when implementing AI/ML projects? What have you heard around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Although I just want to say, Don, I don't want you anywhere near the grocery section of what I'm doing. I'm already struggling with my COVID weight here. So let's maybe innovate in the vegetable section would be helpful for me. No, but in all seriousness, I think you've hit on a really good point, which is there are challenges that we hear pretty consistently from companies that are looking to leverage AI. And I think there's probably 4 main ones. I'll talk about them. I think one is identifying the right business problem to solve is really difficult sometimes. And I think, actually, ironically, your example talks about some of the complexity of trying to understand what's really the issue. I think data is scarce or hard to use is typically the second one. Observability is the third, and people is the fourth. So if I just break those down a little bit, starting back of sort of what is the business problem, the right business problem that you're trying to solve. And so I just say overall, the biggest areas that are making an impact right now tend to be customer service, document heavy processes. AI can help a call center be more efficient, but what's most importantly, again, I just be back and forth, you hear me say like there's efficiencies, there's no question, but it's really, serving that customer better. how do you innovate on that customer experience? So when you think about sort of AI bots that may be able to handle a ton more calls automatically and satisfactory, people feel great if they get the question that they want answered quickly. It's also better able to advise those customer service agents to give better help to a customer right at the beginning. Or if you think about document heavy processes, AI can really help make document processing a lot more efficient and more accurate, sort of less tedious, which again is really about the customer and what that's like. For banks, for example, AI is being used to really supercharge processes like lending, making it easier to process and understand stacks of paper. I think of my own, I've purchased a home in this period, which was really interesting, all electronically. And it was a dramatically different experience in my last round at doing that. I think the second problem I alluded to is the fact that data is scarce or hard to use. So companies really find it challenging to connect data across their enterprise and to share data with their partners in the supply chain, which is really important when you're talking about how to gain more efficiencies and benefits from it. I think this is changing because cloud data platforms like Google Cloud are able to break down those silos, really building, transitioning to a data culture and governance. Organizing disparate sources and getting valuable insights from it quickly is really key. And BigQuery is a great example of a product that we have that's really helping customers solve those challenges that I know you're well familiar with. I think the third challenge that I hear consistently is around observability. Decision-making was heuristic because of limits of what people could actually observe. That's changing, because of this digitization. I talked about myself, downloading a credit card app, the things that I did on my phone in terms of financial transactions overall. We're now, with the digitization between mobile phones, connected devices, there is so much more information and things that can be observed that is really ideal for what an AI model can leverage. Then I just be people. So there's still a large skills gap in finding people that really know how to implement AI. And AI used to be hard and research focused. Google is trying to solve that by creating a really easy to use platform. And then we have partners like Fractal that can really step in, as Don articulated, and try to break down sort of that customer problem. What's the best thing to solve for to unlock that? So I think really addressing the fact that you may have gaps across all of those elements and bringing them together is it's so important in the kind of role that Fractal can play with customers.
Got it. Well articulated, Carolee. I think both Don and I can agree that we share a lot of those factoids, if you will, as challenges that we hear, or some level of skepticism and a fair amount of education that's required to get people to cross over from the land of thinking about it to actually believing and begin adopting, if you will. One final question before we move into the audience Q&A, Carolee and Don, to both of you. If there is one key action or one key takeaway on AI that you'd like our audience and participants to take away from today's session, what would that be? Carolee, we'll start with you and then turn it over to Don.
Sure. I think if I were to say one thing, I would be AI can not only create efficiencies, but it can help you better serve your customer. And the way I'd really think about it, like the real pony in there is your customer's customer. So when we can step out and understand who we're trying to not just impact ourselves, but who is that customer looking to serve? How do you transform that experience? That is where you will have these leapfrog moments. That's what you'll do. What Don was alluding to of how do you not just survive but thrive. I think the time to invest is now. And the great news again is this is not an investment because of a one-time unprecedented situation, but this is an investment that is going to bear fruit for your business in an ongoing way.
Got it. Don?
Absolutely agree with Carolee. Let me just bring in a totally different dimension to this. I think we all focus on technology, and that has simply changed the game for everybody. But we must all also remember that it's also about people. And this is something that we at Fractal take very, very seriously. Because at the end of the day, the best minds are actually human minds, right? The best algorithms can be made to work mechanically, but it's all about people. So we always would like to ask, organizations who are going into AI, who are looking at transforming their business, leveraging AI and technology, don't forget about the people. At the end of the day, they are very, very important. So you've got to raise the bar for talent, and also the idea of the ethics behind AI. That's very important for us at Fractal. Ethical AI is a very, very important concept, and we take it very seriously. So while there are commercial benefits, let's not forget the ethics behind AI and how it actually impacts us, and the social impact of AI as well. We can make a huge difference commercially, but the difference that we can make socially is pretty transformative. So we are always aware of that, and to all the enterprises who are listening in, keep in mind, it's about people, it's about ethics, it's about values.
I just, if you don't mind, Satish, just to, sorry, what
please.
Don's comment, I think, is like spot on when you think about people. And I think it just reminds me too of one of these pieces of, I appreciate him bringing in that comment, to never lose sight of that, because I think a really important element for that is around diversity of perspective, and sort of how do you make sure as you're looking at things that you're able to bring in that breadth, and that in its best form, that is some of what AI will be able to do, is not be sort of what are your own biases, but hopefully that you're looking at real data and information, and also being able to pull in a diverse set of folks who can really look at a situation, ask questions, and challenge. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Satish, but I love what Don said, because I think in the end, this is really about people.
Yep, no, thank you so much. And certainly points well made, Don and Carolee, thank you for that. We have a whole bunch of questions from the audience and the participants, and I'm not sure if we're going to have time to go through all of that, but I'm going to summarize at least a few of them in the remaining 8 minutes that we have before we wrap up. While we spoke about some of the first wave of challenges, that companies are facing, and the focus areas around, customer service or supply chain or data-heavy processes, if you will, as enterprises think about AI at scale, what are some of the challenges that you foresee? And Carolee, this is for you and for Don. I'd like to hear both perspectives. And what are companies looking for? What typically, they realize there's a challenge. They think technology can solve it, but where does it go from here? Customer service, great place to start. Supply chain, great place to start. Data-heavy processes, great place to start. But if we were to scale using AI, what next?
Well,
Don, do you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carolee, please. Yep.
Sure. No, I think I think it's an interesting way to think about the question. I think there's a part one that's really incredible about sort of AI scales to like incredible sizes. I think you heard me articulate what some of the challenges were, and oftentimes it's simply, I think the opportunities are incumbent, like it's in the data. And so the degree to which you can, one of the challenges of AI at scale is just making sure that you are using some technology that helps you capture all of the information that you've got there, so that you can really mine the connections between discrete pieces. I think that's sometimes one of the most impactful things around scaled AI is frankly what it suggests to you that you wouldn't have thought of on your own. And that's really incumbent on having capturing sort of that data and information overall. And so out of the pieces of just talking about sort of what some of the challenges are, that does unlock new ways to think about your business and to understand things about your customers that you didn't realize that they're telling you under the covers. I think that's where the real, that's one of the areas of, incredible opportunity.
Carolee, thanks. Don, in the context of, how we approach a decisions to data perspective, can you elaborate on, some of the points of view you have, in conjunction with what Carolee just shared in terms of scaled AI outcomes?
Yeah, I think we are living in interesting times. I think we have the technology available that allows data on your fingertips, right? We have tools at our disposal that take, for example, if you have a field force, you've got the field force with data on their fingertips, where they are, when they want it, how they want it. They don't have to run reports. They can simply ask questions. So leveraging things like NLP, you're talking into a phone. If you are a rep working for a CPG company in some godforsaken place, all you need is telephony and Wi-Fi. You're able to access information. If you're an executive, you're able to take executive decisions because data and information is now available at your fingertips, right? So that is a whole new paradigm. Data is now everywhere. It's totally democratized. It's not just a cliche. In real terms, if you don't know your numbers, in the good old days when we started our careers, right? I still remember my first manager telling me that if you don't know your numbers, you don't know anything. And boy, was he right. I mean, we know our numbers in a very different way now. The other interesting thing that I think is very important for us to realize is, given the digitization that's happening, it's very important for businesses to see what is the best value to get out of the digitization investment that they've already done and they intend to do. One of the things that we're helping our clients with is identifying friction in the digital journey, right? And that has created some amazing results for organization. We actually worked for an organization, a telco, which has got an online portal. And by simply identifying friction, we're able to save hundreds of millions of dollars. So the ability to identify areas of business problems quickly, deliberate on it with a three-dimensional view of AI, engineering, and design and behavioral sciences, and the ability to experiment rapidly, fail fast, is a whole new paradigm in taking it to the next level.
Got it, Don. That's very helpful. There's one specific question that came up to the manufacturing sector. So whether it's discrete or process manufacturing, that industry seems to suffer the most by way of data being in silos, data being in non-digital formats, decisions being taken more heuristically than objectively. Would love to hear your insights, Carolee, on how you see just this domain, just the manufacturing domain or the manufacturing industry, use AI or adopt AI to solve core business problems, some of which are very fundamental and infrastructural in nature, but specific to manufacturing. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think, actually, I think that the frame that Don just talked about is a really interesting one in that, because I think he talked about friction in the context of the consumer experience. But I think manufacturing industries have a very similar experience around where there is, like in some cases, friction, and depending on how you define friction is sort of how do they understand where they've got bottlenecks, where they've got quality issues. Those are all things that essentially are creating drag or slowdown in the process. And so there are so many things. And again, it's analogous to the example that I used before in medicine about thinking about how much more effectively actually an AI model is to be able to ingest millions and millions of examples of diagnostic tests and be able to look at them, frankly, in a way that a human being would get tired of doing. And that's really analogous to the manufacturing process as well, is thinking about when you're looking at quality control and trying to check so many different things at different points in the process. And oftentimes deploying AI can really help companies identify, and in some cases, even relationships between discrete spots, whether it's on a floor and the relationship between those, and in terms of what's happening in the quality of the output, identifying something earlier on in the process that actually was causing the flaw that you're seeing later. Imagine the impact of that, right? If you can stop that earlier in the flow. So I think there's a lot of pieces, and certainly for anyone who's in manufacturing, the whole element of sort of the automation of their supply chain and kind of understanding and being able to predict. I know we had lots of, from CPG companies to manufacturing companies in this time, everyone's been wondering when is the volume going to turn up? Where is it going to turn up? right? How do I understand how to be ready while not sitting on, not sitting on inventory? And, many of us have also experienced that in terms of trying to get, I mentioned, bought a house in this period, trying to get stuff fixed right now and finding wood could be a challenge. So I think there's all kinds of things that when you think about in that supply chain of being able to predict what folks are going to be able to need so you can be ready at the right time is really important.
Got it. Carolee, that's very, very helpful. And, I think manufacturing is so wide that these specific issues in different weights are applicable to those. But I'm afraid sorry, but we've run out of time, at least for today's webinar. But let me summarize at least some of the key takeaways that I picked up. One about being, very quick in responding to change, and business leaders driving transformation, and this not being just the domain of technology leaders. A maniacal focus, if you will, on customer value and using CX as a differentiator. And last, I think, this is going to be a truism for a very long time, that data is here to stay, AI is here to stay. And, the cloud is more than a reality today and is a way of doing business and not just an alternative way of doing business. But with that, Carolee, thank you, and Don, for being so generous with your time today. Thank you to everyone in our, fireside chat today, all the participants and all the attendees. Just one quick favor and a house check before we leave. If you can rate us on the webinar by clicking on the link or submitting your ballots below on a scale of 1 to 5, that'll be helpful. Really appreciate all of you sharing your time again with us. Thank you so much and have a great day. It was wonderful having you, Carolee and Don.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye, everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Yep, bye-bye.